The Thing About Georgie, Chapter 3. All right, this one's important. I want you to measure some things. First, you need to find a tape measure. A ruler would work too. Okay, are you ready? Good, because I have a list for you. You have to fill in all the blanks. The distance from the floor to the doorknob on my bedroom door equals blank inches. My light switch equals blank inches. The distance from the floor to the edge of my windowsill equals blank inches. The distance from the floor to the faucet on my bathroom sink equals blank inches. The distance from the floor to the kitchen table equals blank inches. And the distance from the floor to the freezer door equals blank inches. Don't put the tape measure away yet, because I need you to measure one more thing. Yourself. Just stand against a wall and have someone mark your height with a pencil. You probably want to do it pretty lightly because I don't want you to get in trouble for writing on the walls. That happened to me one time. So, how tall are you? The distance from the floor to the top of my head equals blank inches. Now, make one other mark on the wall, exactly 42 inches off the ground. That's how tall Georgie is. It's about a little bit taller than my yardstick. Look at that list again. Would Georgie have to stand on his tiptoes to see out your bedroom window? How easy would it be for him to brush his teeth at your bathroom sink? Would he need to pull over a chair if he wanted to get some ice cream out of your freezer? I think you should keep all that in mind. When Mrs. Moretti dropped Georgie off at home, his mom was giving a piano lesson, so he gave her a quick hug and then went to his room. He pushed up on the lever attached to his light switch, dumped his backpack on the floor, and jumped up the set of wooden steps to plop onto his bed. He lay on his back with his hands behind his head, trying to decide the best way to spend his money. If he got his parents nice presents, like maybe a really great tie for his dad to wear to concerts and some perfume or something for his mom, they'd probably like it a lot and think he was the greatest son on the whole planet. But he'd have a lot less money to spend on comic books. Maybe he should just get them one thing together. They'd probably like it just as much, and it would be cheaper too. He just had to decide what. While he thought, Georgie stared at his walls. Before he was born, Georgie's parents had fixed up his room, doing what many parents do when they prepare for a new baby. They painted the walls a calm shade of blue, put up brand new curtains, and bought all new furniture. Of course, afterward, when they realized Georgie wasn't just like other parents' kids, that he wasn't growing the way he was supposed to, they had to change things around a bit. They added levers on the light switches and bought a special low desk and a dresser, just for him. But the poem stayed the same. Georgie's parents had written the poem themselves. They said they'd worked on it for days before they even started painting, making sure every line was perfect. The poem was written at the very top of the wall in curving lines right near the ceiling, and it wove all the way around the room. Georgie had read it so many times that he had the whole thing memorized. Where's that fellow with the cello? Where's the czar who plays guitar? Where's the harpist who looks sharpest? We must find out where they are. Are you nimble with the cymbal? Do you like to play trombone? Grab your trumpet, grab your tuba. You can bring your xylophone. Choose the instrument that suits you. Pack your things and come along. Everyone is waiting for you. Only you complete our song. His parents had even painted little pictures to go with it, around the waves of the words. There was a miniature tuba and a small brown cello. On lazy Saturday mornings when Georgie was awake but not quite ready to get out of bed, he would lie with his covers snuggled up to his chin and read the poem over and over, trying to think up rhymes of his own. He'd come up with a few like, "Where's the chum who plays the drum?" But none of them were as good as the lines his parents had written for him. Georgie was certain that one day he'd find a rhyme all his own, one that was good enough to paint right up there with his parents' poem. Maybe that's what he could do for Christmas, write his parents a poem. That wouldn't cost anything at all. All at once, Georgie noticed that out in the living room, the clunky notes of the piano lesson had stopped, and there was a new sound drifting in, the sound of his parents tuning up. Georgie leaped out of bed to go listen. The thing about Georgie's parents was that they were musicians, real professional musicians, in a symphony orchestra. They had been since before Georgie was born, so he'd been surrounded by music his whole life. His mom always liked to say that when he was a baby and the doctor asked what she was feeding him, she replied, Mozart, Vivaldi, and strained carrots. It wasn't like Georgie was some kind of classical music geek, though. He knew all about the latest bands and whose hair was cool now and what the lead singer of Trepidation's favorite kind of Pop-Tart was. He just happened to like classical music, too. Andy didn't. Not at all. In fact, Andy had been to only one concert with Georgie, and afterward he'd said that he'd rather eat his Nana's chicken neck special for a week straight than be bored out of his mind like that again. He said it would be cooler if Georgie's parents became rock stars. Well, maybe so. But as Georgie snuggled into the corner of the couch with a blanket wrapped around him and listened to his parents begin to practice, he couldn't help thinking that things were nice just the way they were. If Georgie were an artist, if he didn't have stubby little fingers, that is, and could hold his pencil like any regular person and make it move where he wanted to, he knew exactly what he'd get his parents for Christmas. He would draw a picture, a really beautiful one, of his mom and dad playing their instruments. He closed his eyes and pretended for a second that he was an artist. In his mind, he made his hand trace out the lines he would draw, exactly the way he wanted them. He started sketching his mom first. He drew her sitting down, tall and elegant, neck stretched proudly, her gigantic harp standing even taller in front of her. He carefully traced her long arm as it reached out to pluck a string he hadn't drawn yet. Georgie's dad played the cello, which was nowhere near as tall as his mom's heart, but was still taller than Georgie. Squeezing his eyes closed a little tighter, Georgie pretended to sketch out his father. Left hand on the neck of the cello, right hand drawing the bow sideways across the string. As Georgie pretended to draw, his parents kept playing. His mom's notes were quick and distinct. Georgie always felt like he could see the notes she played, one by one, as they left the harp like floating droplets of water. The notes from his dad's cello seemed to come out like one long ribbon of music, sweet and deep, and it was hard sometimes to figure out where one left off and another one started. When his parents finished practicing, Georgie helped them set the table for dinner. So, his mom asked, how was school today? Georgie shrugged as he set a plate on the table. Good, he said. Anything exciting happen? Georgie tried to think as he folded napkins. School seemed like a million years ago now, but he knew his mom wouldn't give up until he gave her some solid details. Mr. Myers said we're going to start working on the 4th grade play after winter break. We get to write all the parts ourselves. His mom nodded. So, what's it about this year? The presidents. Georgie was glad about that. Last year, the 4th grade play had been about vitamins, which was probably the most boring thing ever. That sounds great. Who gets to be in it? Kids get to volunteer, he said. So are you going to volunteer? I'm not sure yet. What Georgie really meant was no. A big, fat no. But he didn't want to tell his mother that. She smiled at him. You could be George Washington. Georgie smiled back. He already was George Washington. Well, sort of. That was his secret between him and his parents. Georgie's full name was George Washington Bishop. They had named him that because they wanted him to grow up to be big and important, just like the first president of the United States. Well, important anyway. They said it was always a good idea to have a great person around to push you to do great things yourself. And that's why they gave him such a special name, so he'd have someone great with him at all times, pushing him from the middle. Georgie knew practically everything there was to know about the real George Washington. In his room he had tons of books about him, even some big fat ones written for adults. Georgie loved that he had a secret connection to the real George Washington. It made him feel that one day he'd do something great, like become the commander-in-chief of the colonial army or help draft a constitution. And even though his name was with him all the time, none of the kids at school knew that Georgie had someone important hidden inside him. Not even Andy knew it. So, his mom said, you should volunteer. Georgie shrugged again. He really did want to be George Washington. He'd thought of it as soon as Mr. Myers had told them what the play was about. But Georgie didn't look like anything like the real George Washington. Not at all. Because the real George Washington hadn't been born with a big head, a stuck-out forehead, arms that barely reached his waist, and legs that bowed at the knees. And Georgie was certain that if the real George Washington had looked like that, nobody would have listened to him when he ordered his troops to cross the Delaware. "I'll think about it," Georgie told her. His dad came in from the kitchen with a plate of pork chops. "Guess what, Alan?" Georgie's mom said to him. "The fourth grade play this year is on the presidents." "Really?" He raised his eyebrows at Georgie. "You could be George Washington." Georgie mustered up a smile and climbed into his special chair, the one that was a few inches higher than all the others. Sooner or later, he was going to have to explain to his parents that he did not look like George Washington. Luckily, his father changed the subject for him. "Georgie," he said as he spooned carrots onto his son's plate, "I think your mother and I need to tell you something." Georgie looked up quickly. What was this? It sounded serious. "Okay," he said. His father set down the plate of carrots and took hold of Georgie's mother's hand. Georgie looked at them curiously. They kept looking at each other, then back to Georgie. What was going on? Was someone sick? Were they moving? What? "Well," his dad said, "what we wanted to tell you..." He cleared his throat and glanced at Georgie's mom again. Georgie held his breath and hoped for the best. "Georgie," his dad said, "you're going to be a big brother." Georgie's chin